Rap music is still the most popular music genre in the United States as of 2023, but something interesting is happening to the genre as we speak. Listen to this statistic. In 2023, according to Luminate, there was a new music report about the market shares in music and the way that it's actually declining. So, in 2021, hip hop held a market share of 27.7%. Then in 2022, it declined by 26.8%, not declined by that percentage, but it went down to that percentage. And now, as of 2023, it's down to 25.9%, and it has been on a decline since its absolute peak in 2018. And the question as of 2023 is, where is the genre going? Because there's been new reports that record labels don't even want to buy into hip-hop artists anymore. Now there's even reports that the genre is going down as a whole. And now where do we have this new talent, and who's going to be carrying the genre? So in today's episode, Lou and I wanted to speak about this because we haven't had the opportunity to do so. We're a hip-hop podcast, and obviously we speak in very positive light about hip-hop music, but there's definitely something missing from the genre right now.
There's definitely a change coming, I feel like. And we saw that when everybody was freaking out that we reached the halfway mark of the year and we didn't have a single number one rap album or number one rap song until we got the Pink Tape by Uzi and Doja Cat's Paint the Town Red only in the summertime. And I think it's no surprise that the mainstream scene of hip-hop right now is not in its best shape. The only really memorable and amazing album that we got in 2023 was Utopia. And now we're asking the question, do we have to rely on the underground? Is there still going to be, forward movement for the genre when it comes to the industry's leaders? And that's what I want to talk about right now, is the fact that it feels like 99% of rappers that are new and are coming up and that are reaching that top dog position can't really hold it for that long. If you take it back to 96 when Biggie rapped, "Your reign at the top was short like leprechauns," he was speaking facts. Or even looking at what Dr. Dre said on Wesley's Theory, anybody can get it, but the hard part is keeping it, motherfucker. Like, I feel like rappers looking at, let's say, someone like Lil Baby, where is the longevity there, bro? He was on top of the game in 2020. He had like 47 songs charting on the Billboard Hot 100. People like Lil Wayne and Kanye West were calling him their favorite rapper. He was working with Drake, Post Malone. My Turn was a juggernaut of an album. He was on top of the world. And then you advance 3 years later and he's canceling shows because he tried to do an arena tour. He had his opening act, the Kid Laroi, drop out of it. And now there's this narrative that sonically, he's getting a bit lazy. He's choosing a lot of the same generic trap beats.
Well, let's go on to another case study. Let's talk about Roddy Rich. Roddy Rich was another example of a rapper that took the industry by storm. Someone who had everything in the palm of his hands and just, I feel like, kind of let it loose to a certain extent. You know, you go back to 2019, Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial, was one of the biggest rap albums ever. Commercially, you had a diamond record on there, and commercially, it was just up from there, especially that being his debut. But now you look 3 years later, and it's the question, well, where is he, and what is he going to be doing?
Yeah, and he had like a decade-defining hit with The Box. He got the Baby a number one hit with Rockstar. And ever since then, it seems like his sound is just not evolving. And when he came into the game, he was fresh, he was new, he had the gospel influence. He really seemed like he could have been the face of rap, and now he's chasing that success that he had 3 years ago. Even looking at someone else, for example, like a Cardi B. You look at Invasion of Privacy, every song on there is platinum. She won the Grammy. People were hailing her as the new queen of rap, and now she keeps pumping the brakes on her sophomore album because with every single that she's dropping, it's not climbing the charts the way that she wants it to. These songs are not connecting. Look at a song like Bongos with Megan Thee Stallion. She did a rinse and repeat formula of WAP. And no one's buying it.
It's the same thing. Even let's say someone like Lil Durk, who is extremely impressive commercially, especially as of late, but I feel like there's a certain sentiment in the community that he's been making the same music for the past 4 years. And this is not to single out those four rappers in particular. Those are just case studies because they are at the top of the game. But what's interesting is that when you have to look at your industry leaders and the people that are leading this genre into the next decade, you have to look at these people because those are the people that are topping the charts. But what's interesting is that you go back to the late 2000s, early 2010s, you had J. Cole, you had Kendrick, you had Drake coming through, and you saw them be able to put up these massive numbers, but also maintain the quality of music and set a standard and a precedent for what music should sound like at that time. And yes, I think they achieved that, but I mean, to ask them to do that again in a new decade, I feel like is not only right to them, but it's like, what's going to happen in the next decade? And then
Yeah.
how do you continue evolving the genre and maintain its dominance, excuse me, if you're not pumping out this talent and there's no one to be able to take over the reins?
So what I want to ask you is this, because I feel like the rap game right now, especially when it comes to the mainstream, it feels frozen. It feels like we're on a pause because as music fans, we're shareholders into rap, right? We're investing our time into the genre and certain artists, but it just seems like there's a lot of legends that are still around. Looking at the Drakes, the Kendricks, the Coles, the Kanye Wests, the Tyler, the Creators, the Nas's, all these people, I'm not personally ready as someone who's investing into the genre for them to take a bow and pass the torch on to the next set of industry leaders, because I feel like the rap game would be on life support, bro. If you would remove all those names I just mentioned, and of course a couple of others that I didn't mention, but if you remove those legends and those established acts, what are we really left with in terms of the mainstream? So let me ask you, why do you think it's so tough for us to get these industry leaders and for these artists to have that longevity?
I think it's just where the listener is at right now, and the fact that at this moment in time, it's so hard to compete within the genre, and that it's a kind of a different time as well, because I feel like we're in an awkward phase for rap music where you look at where certain people are at with their career, and it's either, well, they're kind of past their prime, but they're not in the retirement section of their career. But then again, it's like, well, who's going to be on the up and up, and who's going to be able to take over, just the overall direction, and going back to those Lil Babies, those Jack Harlows, like this next generation of rappers that are supposed to come through, like we were talking about before, it's so short-lived, and you just see it kind of disappear in a matter of years. And, another thing too, you got to ask yourself is like, why the record labels aren't really doing anything about this to a certain extent, and how much trouble they're actually having pushing this genre at the moment. And what was alarming is that Ebro actually came out and he was speaking about this, and he was like, they're trying to push more Afrobeat and they're trying to push more Latin music more than ever because hip-hop just isn't selling.
He said this exactly in a tweet. He said, it should be noted that many major record labels have deprioritized signing rappers. The focus is now African music and Latin music. And I feel like this is interesting because the record labels are going insane. They're seeing the same negative result over and over again with these artists that they're encouraging to chase viral hits, to chase success on TikTok, which we know is short-lived. We know that's not the way to really cultivate a real fan base. You look at someone like Coi Leray, for instance, and I don't mean to single her out because I think that she does have some great songs, but 24 million monthly listeners, an abundance of viral TikTok songs, but she puts out an album and it sells 10K first week in 2023. And can she really sell out shows with a couple thousand people? I don't know. You look at someone else like an Ice Spice, for example, right? One of the hottest rappers in the game right now, one of the most popular artists. Is she really selling high art? Is she really making some of the best music out? Should she have the stature that maybe someone else like a Red Veil maybe should have instead? That's all up into interpretation. What I'm trying to say is that she's one of the biggest rappers in the game and she doesn't even have an album out. That just shows you that we're in the singles era now, and that the labels and maybe the artists are thinking about the business aspect of it and not the actual integrity behind the art. And going into the whole idea of Ebro saying that labels are deprioritizing signing rappers, that's where I'm scared as a hip-hop fan, because I agree with you. Rap doesn't feel the same anymore, but on the same token, I feel like hip-hop is offering us more sounds and subgenres than ever before.
Well, listen to this. I also want to make this clear. I also don't think it's only up to the record labels, and I don't I don't think that you could, go in front of these record labels front offices with pitchforks and say, "Oh, well, you guys have completely ruined hip hop music." No, obviously not. These people are people like us. They're trying to make money and they're trying to do their thing and they're trying to actually help artists. But I think another thing that's interesting is that if you look at where artists are at right now, I feel like they're confused more than ever on how to market their music while also being able to sustain the quality of their music. And I've had conversations about this with different producers and artists, and it's just this game of cat and mouse of like, well, I have this incredible body of work, but it's just not going to sell.
Yeah.
Or, I have this song I'm not really proud of, but the record label is telling me that it's going to go absolutely crazy. Look at the Steve Lacy situation. If it wasn't for Bad Habits, would Steve Lacy be Steve Lacy? Probably not. But then again, Steve Lacy didn't like Bad Habits when it first came out. So then you got to ask yourself, where is the compromise? And that's where everyone is kind of confused. I feel like, just from my perspective and looking at where things are at right now, that's what I mean by the awkward phase. Everyone is trying to figure out, how do we move in this new digital marketing era and how do we get it going? Because another thing that's we have to consider, if you look at back then, right? You look at the Jay-Z era, the Eminem era, even the Drake and Kanye era, this was really like, it was bare bones in comparison to the marketing that's going on right now and how much exposure music has right now as a whole, right? Because take TikTok out of the equation, you take all these digital platforms out of the equation, there was monopolies that were owned by the record labels. Now there is so much music out there to be able to go consume, and there's so many content creators, example like us and other fantastic platforms out there, that the record labels don't have control anymore like they used to, and the market share is a lot more thin. So you look at what's happening and you start to ask yourself, well, does a record label even want to commit 10 plus years to be able to go sign a Drake and pump in that type of money into him? Probably not, because the risk is much higher. So then you start to ask yourself, how do you move in these industry climates, and how do you be able to move forward and also have the quality of music to be able to change the new generation of rap music?
I think that is the major issue, is that, labels are trying to recoup the advance they gave their artists so quick, and that's why they're encouraging them to make these viral hits, and that's why certain artists that are getting signed to these 360 deals feel that pressure to have to conform to certain industry trends to try to recoup what they were given. And I feel like that's where the issue comes in. But then you look at these miraculous success stories, looking at an artist like Russ, who took that independent route, who was able to grind for 10 years and organically cultivate that fan base. You look at someone like Kendrick Lamar as well. He didn't have a #1 hit until Humble. It took his 4th studio album after he was already established to get that #1. Even looking at the fact that if you go through Good Kid, Mad City or To Pimp a Butterfly, not a single song on either of those albums reached the top 20 of the Billboard Hot 100. Like, he managed to propel himself to the level that he did by putting together a lot of thought into his bodies of work and really making his singularity as an artist be the appeal behind the music.
Well, I do
not
agree.
Not having to remix an old Fergie song or what other trends certain artists are chasing. And yes, that might be sustainable for a couple of years, but speaking about the artists that we mentioned prior of the new industry leaders, a lot of them have their peak early on with their debut album and oversaturate the market, giving us too much music and not being able to evolve into a new sound because they're relying on that sound that got them
While
popping.
I do agree with you, I want to kind of play a bit of devil's advocate here, to be quite honest with you. Is a listener going to go through a GKMC the same way as they did 10 years ago? That's what I'm asking myself. I know I will. I know you will. And I know most of you guys that are watching this video will. But kind of looking at it from more of a global view, I do think that, we already spoke about attention spans and the way that everything's kind of fucked right now in that regard. You look at the way that that's affecting music consumption, and does an artist feel like it's lucrative to pour 5 years of their life into a studio album just to have it flop because no one has the attention span to listen to it? So while I do agree with you, I think that the problem is a bit more deeply and rooted to where, like, maybe these artists do have the intentions to carry out a similar career to a Kendrick, a J. Cole, or, build up their catalog in these studio albums. But I just feel like the user behaviors have kind of shifted against that in a certain way. And I still do think that it goes back to the same thing. Rap music is just trying to find a way to adapt to these digital marketing mediums, and they're trying to find a way to bring this new culture back. And honestly, for myself, that's why I always wanted to start NFR and start doing this, was to bring the album experience back and to be able to bring these things back to the table. But it's going to take a conscious effort from the entire community just to be able to start getting back into the catalog, start believing in artists again. As much as I love my Kendrick Lamar records, and as much as I want to see Drake drop his album a year, I want to also see new artists come through and bring something new and refreshing, bring something that hasn't been done before. So let me ask you that. in this new climate of so much noise, and yet everyone sort of trying to grasp what's coming at them. You as an artist, just trying to put yourselves in the shoes of the artist, right? And I don't think this is going to be accurate, but I'm just trying to maybe, create a little bit of dialogue with you. How would you move? What do you do in that sort of situation?
I think the most important thing is really just staying true to your craft. If that means an independent route, if that means taking certain years to build up your name in a community where you're consistently posting content, you're consistently posting, your music, if it's freestyles, whatever the case may be, all through social media, and getting the attention of other artists that maybe make similar music and maybe want to collaborate. I think that, again, this is a point that, you made when we've spoken about this in the past, of a lot of artists that made it big in that early 2010s blog era, got there, in part thanks to the cosigns that they had, whether that be a Lil Wayne and Drake, whether that be a Kendrick Lamar and Dr. Dre. And the question becomes, how do you get there, right? And I think that, again, it just comes into harnessing your truth as an artist and really being focused on the art and sort of ignoring all the exterior noise.
Yes, and I also think what's interesting, I was going through a couple of IG posts where there was a couple of interviews that were going viral, and they were talking about just mainstream media and hip-hop right now and where it's kind of at with things. And people love to say the pay-to-play thing, right? The payola, right? Like, you have to pay to get onto these major platforms and have, like, let's say, the Complex feature and the pitchforks and whatever the case may be. And while, yes, I do think that is true, and I do think that you got to buy yourself into certain situations with these big platforms, you don't need that anymore. Especially with the age of digital marketing, you realistically don't even need to pump $1 into the way your videos are getting pushed right now, especially through short form content and algorithms. I mean, I've spoken to so many different artists that have found success just with, different types of visions creatively on how they were able to start curating their own success and how they were able to later say, well, okay, let's allocate a budget towards this and let's actually get through it. So that's what I'm trying to say too, is that I feel like a lot of artists are down on themselves because they feel like, well, it's this impossible uphill mountain climb that seems way too hard to attain. But it's quite simple, and it's actually as simple as being yourself and just being consistent with, the nail and just the hammer and just continuing to knock yourself into a position to where you're going to find success. And that's why I feel like also a lot of artists right now are down on themselves because they're trying their hardest, but the approach might be a bit different for themselves.
Yeah,
right?
The approach is definitely different. To go back to the whole topic of the album experience, I don't think that's dead at all. I mean, we have albums from the likes of JID and Denzel Curry, which are being celebrated by the community, that are being listened to regularly by the community, even though they might not reach the heights they deserve to reach in terms of the exposure of it all. There's still an audience for that. And even if you look at an artist like Rod Wave, he just sold, I think, 140,000 copies first week with his new album, Nostalgia. And if you go through that album, there's a lot of substance in it. And I feel like that's what's missing in, mainstream music as well, is just that substance and the actual meaning behind your lyricism. And when it comes to newer artists, look at the approach that Red Veil took, actually crafting a solid body of work that organically got the attention of content creators, got the attention of artists to the point that he has Denzel Curry wanting to remix his music. And all of that stemmed from him being a student of the game, studying his craft and putting it out to the public. And organically, he had that growth through hard work and through him really just keeping that artistic integrity. I think that's the bottom line.
I completely agree with you, and I think that has to be the thing, or else you could kind of guess what your shelf life is going to be like in a couple of years from now.
Shelf life of cream puffs.
There we go. Like you guys kind of have to put it into perspective, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone has to make their money the way that they want to make it, and people have families to feed and stuff. But I mean, if you truly are in this and you want to make a legacy that's going to even, benefit you longer down the line, and you're not going to have the shelf life of a cream puff like Lou's saying, then you want to go after that. Another thing that's interesting is I think that when you look at someone like a Red Veil or a D2X or even the Griselda movement, just like all of these incredible rappers that are coming up right now, to say that there's not a market share for hip hop anymore is completely false. I hear people saying, "Oh, well, rap's dead," or "Oh, well, rap's this, rap's that." Do you understand how many people are still interested in this genre?
There's more music festivals across the world right now than there ever has been, to the point where you have an artist like JPEG Mafia, who's so anti-industry, anti-establishment, touring all over the world and being a top biller on a lot of these festivals. And I think in terms of the conversation of where do we go from here, what does the future hold, I can only hope, I think we can all only hope as fans that these different subgenres and subsections of hip-hop, like industrial hip-hop, experimental hip-hop, Griselda type of sound, gets more ears and becomes more popular gradually with time, because that's where a lot of the quality is right now. And I feel like hopefully we can have newer artists find a way to make it out of the dark tunnel, if it's through innovation, if it's through quality bodies of work, to really get there.
And I will say this, just to end off this episode on a positive note, I do think some of the best music you will hear out of this genre will be coming out in the next couple of years.
That's facts.
And I will say this, the new generation is coming up. There's new talent in media. There's new talent in music business. There's new talent in producing camps. There's new talent on the artist side of things. There's new talent everywhere. And it is now our time as a community to be able to really push forward this genre as best as we possibly can. Keep our integrity in our craft and make sure that this genre reaches new heights that people are counting us out on. I'm sorry.
Guys, hip-hop is not dead.
I'm telling you.
It's not dead.
It might feel different, but different is not bad. So with that being said, guys, let me know in the comment section, how do you feel about this topic? Because the likes of Ebro and so many different other figures in hip-hop media and even artists themselves have been speaking about this subject, and they're kind of worried. But here at NFR Podcast, we're not worried. We think that it's going to go completely fine. We think that these times are needed. And once we get past this little hump, well, let me tell you, the talent is going to flourish. So, as I said before, let me know in the comment section. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.